They said Adrian Voss couldn't be broken. They were wrong. In a city where power meant everything and mercy was suicide, the heir to the Voss empire discovered too late that his greatest enemy wore the face of family, and his only salvation came from the one person he'd dismissed as worthless. A strategic marriage, a timid bride who wouldn't meet his eyes, a web of betrayal so carefully woven that by the time he saw it, everything he'd built was already burning. But the girl who trembled in daylight, she'd been counting his enemies in the dark. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. Mafia. The emergency meeting began at 3 in the morning. Adrian Voss stood at the head of the obsidian conference table, hands flat against the cold surface, and watched 7 men squirm. They were older than him, most by 20 years, and every single one of them had forgotten that age meant nothing when you controlled the veins of a city. "Walk me through it again," Adrian said. His voice carried the particular quiet that made smart people nervous. Slowly, Marcus Chen, head of logistics, cleared his throat. Sweat beaded at his temples despite the Arctic air conditioning. The shipment was cleared through customs at 1400 hours, standard protocols. But when our people arrived at the warehouse at 1630, it was empty. Adrian didn't look up from the tablet in front of him, scrolling through manifests that shouldn't exist. 42 containers, gone. Security footage conveniently corrupted for exactly 18 minutes, and nobody saw anything. "Sir, we're conducting a full internal—" "You're fired." The words dropped like stones into still water. Marcus went pale. "Mr. Voss, if you'd just let me explain—" "You've had 6 hours to explain. You've given me nothing except excuses and incompetence." Adrian finally lifted his gaze. His eyes were the color of smoke and just as hard to read. "Security will escort you out. You have 30 minutes to clear your office." He pressed a button beneath the table. 2 men in dark suits materialized at the door. Marcus started to speak, thought better of it, and left without another word. The remaining 6 board members sat frozen, afraid to breathe wrong. Adrian returned his attention to the tablet. "The rest of you will conduct individual audits of your departments. I want full reports by noon tomorrow. Personnel records, financial transactions, surveillance logs, everything." He paused. "Anyone who finds this inconvenient is welcome to join Marcus in unemployment." "Understood, sir," came the murmured chorus. "Good. Get out." They scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Alone in the conference room, Adrian allowed himself exactly 10 seconds of frustration. He dragged a hand through dark hair that was starting to escape the rigid styling he'd imposed that morning. Yesterday morning, technically. The Voss Empire didn't sleep, which meant neither did he. 42 containers. Street value somewhere north of 80 million. Vanished like smoke. This wasn't random theft. This was surgery. His phone buzzed. A text from his uncle. "Heard about the shipment. Are you handling it?" Adrian's jaw tightened. Victor Voss had a gift for appearing concerned while offering absolutely no help. He typed back, "Under control." The reply came instantly. "Good. Don't forget, dinner tomorrow night. Your father would want you there." Adrian deleted the message without responding. His father. Dead 6 months now, and Victor still invoked his name like a magic spell that would make Adrian compliant. Thomas Voss had built this empire from dirty money and dirtier deals, had raised Adrian in boardrooms and back rooms, had taught him that emotion was a luxury and trust was suicide. Then he died of a heart attack in his mistress's bed, leaving Adrian an empire and a warning, "Watch Victor, he smiles too much." The phone buzzed again. This time it was James, his head of security. "Found something. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, Adrian stood in a basement server room that smelled like ozone and burned coffee, watching James pull up footage on a monitor that definitely wasn't part of the official security system. "This is the off-book camera network?" Adrian asked. James nodded. He was ex-military, built like a brick wall, and one of 3 people Adrian trusted. The ones Chen didn't know about. "Look at this." The footage showed the warehouse from an angle that captured the main loading area. Timestamp, 1447 hours. Adrian watched workers moving containers with practiced efficiency. Everything normal. Then, at 15:03, a black sedan pulled up to the side entrance. No plates. Tinted windows. That door requires biometric access, James said. Only 12 people in the company have clearance. On screen, someone emerged from the sedan. Impossible to identify, dressed in dark clothes with their face obscured, and placed their hand on the scanner. The door opened. Who? Adrian's voice could have cut glass. James pulled up another window. Access log shows it was Chen's credentials, but look at the timestamp on the actual scan. Adrian leaned closer. The scan registered at 15:03:47, the same moment as the video. Chen was in a meeting with me at 1500, James continued. Didn't leave until 1545. I verified it with building security. He was on the 43rd floor when someone used his biometrics at ground level. Cloned credentials. Which means someone with serious tech access and inside knowledge. James switched to another screen. Here's where it gets interesting. I started pulling financial records, found some irregularities. Show me. What James showed him was a masterclass in embezzlement. Small transactions, buried in legitimate expenses, rerouted through shell companies that dissolved the moment the money cleared. Spread across 3 years, dozens of accounts, hundreds of transfers. Total damage, just over $200 million. Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was systematic, patient, planned years in advance. Who has access to authorize these kinds of transfers, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Executive level. You, your uncle, and the CFO. Get me everything on Richard. The CFO was Victor's appointment, had come on board 8 months before Adrian's father died. Bank records, phone logs, property holdings. I want to know every person he's talked to in the last year. Already started. Should have a full report by morning. Adrian nodded slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. If Richard was dirty, and Richard reported to Victor, no, not yet. He couldn't afford assumptions, no matter how logical they seemed. What about Chen? He asked. Real involvement or Patsy? Honestly, I think Patsy. He's not smart enough to pull this off, and his personal finances are clean. Someone set him up to take the fall. Which meant the real architect was still out there, still operational. Adrian's phone buzzed. Another text from Victor. Also, don't forget about the Hart situation. Contract's been finalized. Dinner will be the announcement. The Hart situation. Right. Adrian had almost successfully buried that particular nightmare in the back of his mind. The strategic marriage his uncle had engineered, presented as a done deal before Adrian had any chance to object. A union between the Voss empire and the Hart family's manufacturing empire, smaller than Voss Holdings, but respectable. Old money trying to merge with new power. And Adrian got stuck with a bride he'd never met. Something wrong? James asked, reading his expression. My uncle's decided I'm getting married. James raised an eyebrow. Congratulations. It's a business arrangement. The Hart family has manufacturing contracts we want. Victor says it's strategic. And you think? I think Victor doesn't do anything without 5 ulterior motives. Adrian pocketed his phone. Keep digging into the financials. I want to know everyone who touched that money, everyone who benefited, and everyone who looked the wrong way while it happened. You think this connects to your engagement? I think the timing is suspicious. My father dies, Victor suddenly becomes very concerned with family legacy and strategic partnerships, and millions start disappearing from accounts my father personally monitored. Adrian headed toward the door. Maybe it's all coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidence. Want me to look into the Hart family? No. Adrian paused at the threshold. I'll handle that myself. The Hart estate sat in the old money district, where trees older than the city itself lined streets that curved instead of gridded. Adrian's driver pulled up to gates that probably cost more than most people's houses, waited for clearance, then proceeded down a driveway bordered by gardens that looked sculpted rather than grown. Old money loved its appearances. A butler, an actual butler, because apparently some people still employed those, greeted Adrian at the door with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested he'd been doing this longer than Adrian had been alive. Mr. Voss, the family is expecting you in the drawing room. Drawing room. Of course. Adrian followed the butler through halls decorated with the kind of art that only existed to prove you could afford it. Everything was calculated to impress, to intimidate. to remind visitors that the Hart family had been wealthy when the city was still building its first skyscrapers. The drawing room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking immaculate grounds, furniture that was probably antique, and three people who turned as Adrian entered. Victor Voss stood near the fireplace, looking perfectly at ease in a setting designed to make outsiders uncomfortable. He smiled, that easy, practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Adrian, glad you could make it." Next to Victor stood a man in his 60s with silver hair and the posture of someone who'd spent his life in boardrooms. Robert Hart, patriarch of the Hart manufacturing empire. His handshake was firm, his smile professional. "Mr. Voss, a pleasure to finally meet you properly. Your uncle speaks very highly of your capabilities." "I'm sure he does," Adrian said, glancing at Victor, who maintained that pleasant smile. "And this," Robert gestured to the third person in the room, "is my daughter, Lena." Adrian had prepared himself for various scenarios. A social climber trading beauty for status, a spoiled heiress who thought marriage was a real-life romance novel, a cold businesswoman who saw this as nothing but a merger. He hadn't prepared for someone who looked like she wanted to disappear into the furniture. Lena Hart was small, maybe 5'4" in the heels she wore that looked uncomfortable, dark hair pulled back in a style too severe for her face. She wore a dress that was expensive and utterly forgettable, the kind of thing designed to blend into backgrounds at charity galas. And she wouldn't meet his eyes. When Robert introduced her, she ducked her head in something that might have been a nod, murmured something that might have been hello, and then found sudden intense interest in her hands. Adrian waited for more. There wasn't any more. "Lena's a bit shy," Robert said with the forced cheerfulness of someone who'd made this excuse many times before. "But she's very intelligent. Graduated top of her class, speaks 4 languages. "Father, please," Lena said softly, still not looking up. Right. Sorry, sweetheart." Robert cleared his throat. "Why don't we all sit down? We have much to discuss." The discussion was Victor and Robert talking at each other about merger benefits, market positioning, and strategic advantages while Adrian tried not to show how much he wanted to be anywhere else. Lena sat in a chair slightly apart from everyone, speaking only when directly addressed, and even then in barely audible sentences. Adrian found himself studying her when the conversation didn't require his input. She had delicate features, the kind that might be pretty if she didn't work so hard at being invisible. Her hands twisted in her lap constantly. She kept her shoulders curved inward, taking up as little space as possible. Everything about her screamed victim, prey, someone the world had taught to make herself small and stay small. Adrian felt nothing but a vague disappointment. This was who Victor had chosen for him? This timid little thing who couldn't even maintain eye contact? "The wedding," Victor was saying, "should be soon. No point in delay. I was thinking 6 weeks. "That seems reasonable," Robert agreed. He glanced at his daughter. "Lena? Any objections?" She shook her head without speaking. "Adrian?" Victor's tone made it clear this wasn't really a question. "Fine." What else could he say? The contracts were signed. The deal was done. Victor had made sure of that before Adrian even knew it was happening. "Wonderful." Robert stood, clearly relieved to have the awkward part over. "Why don't you 2 young people take a walk in the gardens? Get to know each other a bit?" Adrian wanted to refuse, but he caught Victor's expression. Pleasant, expectant, with just a hint of steel underneath. This was a test. Victor wanted to see if Adrian would play along. "Of course," Adrian said, standing. He offered his hand to Lena. "Shall we?" She looked at his hand like it might bite her, then carefully placed her fingers in his palm. Her hand was cold, trembling slightly. They walked in silence through gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Lena kept a careful distance between them, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm evening. "You don't have to be afraid of me," Adrian said finally. She jumped at his voice, then shook her head quickly. I'm just sorry. I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Talking. To people. I know I should be better at it, but I just—" She trailed off, hugging herself tighter. Adrian stopped walking. "Look, we both know what this is. A business arrangement. You don't have to pretend to like me, and I won't pretend to like you. We'll get married, show up to the necessary events, and otherwise stay out of each other's way. Agreed?" For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and for just a second he saw something flicker there, something that wasn't fear or shyness. Then it was gone, and she dropped her gaze back to the ground. "Agreed," she whispered. "Good." Adrian checked his watch. "I think we've walked long enough to satisfy appearances. Let's go back." She nodded, falling into step behind him like a shadow. As they returned to the house, Adrian's phone buzzed with a message from James. "Found something big in Richard's records. You need to see this tonight." Whatever hesitation Adrian might have felt about this marriage evaporated. He had real problems to deal with: missing shipments, embezzlement, potential betrayal at the highest levels of his organization. He didn't have time to worry about a wife who could barely string 2 sentences together. This would be a marriage in name only. She'd stay in her world, he'd stay in his, and they'd both fulfill their obligations without any messy, emotional complications. Simple. Clean. Exactly how Adrian preferred things. He had no way of knowing that Lena Hart had just agreed to the same arrangement while mentally cataloging every security camera in the garden, counting the guards at the perimeter, and noting that Victor Voss had made 3 phone calls during their walk, calls he'd stepped away from the windows to take, which suggested he didn't want anyone reading his lips. No way of knowing that the girl who trembled at raised voices had already identified 6 separate access points to the Voss estate's security system. No way of knowing that timid, shy Lena Hart had learned long ago that invisible people saw everything. The wedding happened on a Tuesday. It wasn't a celebration so much as a corporate merger with flowers. 200 guests who cared more about networking than romance, photographers hired to document the union for business publications, and vows that meant nothing to anyone involved. Lena wore white because that's what was expected. The dress was expensive, custom-tailored, and completely impersonal, chosen by a stylist Victor had hired because apparently Adrian couldn't be trusted to have opinions about wedding dresses. She looked like a porcelain doll, pretty and fragile and empty. Adrian wore a tuxedo and the expression he used for hostile board meetings. They spoke the required words, exchanged rings that cost more than most cars, kissed briefly when the officiant announced them married, a cold press of lips that satisfied tradition and nothing else. Lena's father cried. Victor smiled. Adrian felt nothing. The reception was held at the city's most expensive hotel because subtlety had never been Victor's strength. Adrian shook hands with people he didn't care about, accepted congratulations from business associates who'd sell him out for the right price, and counted down the minutes until he could escape. Lena stood beside him when required, said nothing unless directly spoken to, and looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. When older women complimented her dress, she murmured thank yous so quiet they had to lean in to hear. When men his father's age made inappropriate comments disguised as jokes, she smiled weakly and stared at the floor. "Your bride seems lovely," one of Adrian's board members said, watching Lena retreat to a corner after another forced interaction. "Very demure." "Yes," Adrian said flatly, and found another conversation to have. 3 hours into the reception, he found her in a service hallway, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, expensive dress pooling around her. She'd kicked off the torturous heels. Her carefully styled hair was starting to escape its pins. She looked up when he approached, eyes wide with what might have been guilt. "Sorry," she said immediately. "I just needed a minute. I'll come back." "Stay." Adrian surprised himself by sitting down next to her, ignoring what it would do to his tuxedo. "This is terrible, isn't it?" She blinked at him. "The wedding?" "All of it. The performance, the fake smiles, pretending any of this matters." A long pause. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. "Yes." They sat in silence for a while. Somewhere beyond the walls, the reception continued without them. Music, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses celebrating a union neither bride nor groom wanted. "I won't make demands on you," Adrian said finally. "You can have your own space in the house, your own life. As long as we show up together when required, what you do with your time is your business." "Thank you," Lena said softly. "I'm not doing it to be kind. I'm doing it because I don't have time or energy to play house." He stood, brushed off his tuxedo. "We should go back before people notice." She nodded, reaching for her shoes. "Lena." He waited until she looked at him. If you need anything, money, security, whatever, tell my assistant. She'll handle it. Okay. He left her there to compose herself, returning to the reception and the performance. An hour later, Lena reappeared, makeup fixed, hair repinned, mask back in place. She stood beside him for the remainder of the evening, a silent shadow who flinched at sudden movements and spoke only when spoken to. Adrian's new wife, his strategic partnership, his obligation. He dismissed her from his mind and returned to thinking about the real problems. James had found evidence linking Richard to 3 shell companies, all registered in Victor's name. The web was getting clearer, and every thread led back to his uncle. Tomorrow, Adrian would start pulling those threads. Tonight, he endured the celebration of a marriage that existed only on paper. When the reception finally ended, they rode back to the Voss estate in separate cars. Lena's belongings had already been moved into the east wing, far from Adrian's rooms, exactly as he'd specified. They said goodnight in the foyer, formal and distant, then retreated to opposite ends of the house. Adrian sat in his office until dawn, reviewing financial records and building his case against Victor. Somewhere in the vast house, his wife did whatever timid girls did when left alone. He didn't think about her at all. In her room, Lena stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the grounds of her new prison, and allowed herself a small, private smile. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The first week of marriage passed in a blur of separate routines and careful avoidance. Adrian left for the office before dawn and returned well after midnight. Lena kept to the east wing, taking meals in her room, moving through the house like a ghost when she ventured out at all. The staff reported she was polite, quiet, made no demands. Perfect. Exactly what Adrian needed, a wife who required nothing from him. He threw himself into dismantling Victor's operation with the focused intensity that had built the Voss empire in the first place. James's team tracked every shell company, every suspicious transfer, every thread of the web. What they found was breathtaking in its audacity. Victor had been stealing from the company for 3 years, not just skimming, systematically diverting funds through a network so complex it had taken James's best people weeks to map it. The missing shipment was just the visible tip. Underneath was an ocean of theft. "He's been planning this since before your father died," James said, spreading printouts across Adrian's desk. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Neither of them had slept properly in days. Look at the timeline. First shell company registered 3 years and 4 months ago, right after your father had his first heart attack. Adrian studied the dates. His father's health had been failing for a year before the final attack. Everyone knew it, even if Thomas Voss had refused to admit weakness. Victor saw an opportunity. More than that, I think he helped create it. James pulled up another file. Your father's medical records. I had to call in favors to get these, and what I found doesn't match the official story. Explain. The medication your father was taking for his heart condition, digoxin, standard treatment. But look at the levels in his system when he died. James pointed to a toxicology report. 3 times higher than therapeutic dose. That's not a heart attack. That's an overdose. The room went very quiet. Adrian read the report twice, his mind refusing to accept what the numbers clearly showed. You're saying Victor poisoned him. I'm saying someone did, and Victor had access, motive, and opportunity. James pulled up more files. After your father died, Victor consolidated power fast. Too fast, like he'd been preparing. He pushed through the Hart merger, installed Richard as CFO, and positioned himself as your advisor before you could establish independent control. And I let him. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. Inside, something burned. You were grieving. He counted on that. Adrian stood, walked to the window. Outside, the city sprawled in darkness. Millions of lights representing millions of people who had no idea the empire that employed them was built on murder. What's his endgame? My guess? He bleeds the company dry while appearing to help you, waits for you to fail under the pressure, then steps in as the savior. The board removes you, installs him, and he gets everything your father built. The marriage fits that timeline. Adrian turned back to James. Tie me down with family obligations, add the stress of managing a wife and eventually children, create more opportunities for me to screw up publicly. Exactly. And the Hart family gives him leverage. Their manufacturing contracts are worth billions. If the marriage falls apart, they pull those contracts. The company takes a massive hit, and you look incompetent. He's been playing chess while I thought we were playing checkers. Adrian returned to his desk, studying the evidence with new eyes. Murder, theft, manipulation, all dressed up as family concern and business strategy. We need proof that ties Victor directly to the theft and the medication tampering. Everything we have now is circumstantial. Working on it, but Adrian, James hesitated. We need to be careful. If Victor suspects we're onto him, he could accelerate whatever he's planning, or he could destroy evidence. Right now, he thinks he's untouchable. Then we let him keep thinking that. Adrian gathered the files, locked them in his personal safe. I'll play the dutiful nephew. Show up to family dinners, ask for his advice, make him think I'm dependent on his guidance. Meanwhile, you keep digging. Find me something concrete. What about your wife? Adrian paused. What about her? Victor arranged the marriage. Is it possible she's part of this? The thought had occurred to Adrian. You think he planted her here as a spy? I think we shouldn't assume anything. James pulled up another file. I ran background on Lena Hart. Surface level. Everything checks out. Wealthy family, private schools, graduated top of her class from an expensive university most people buy their way into. But dig deeper and it gets strange. Strange how? She has almost no digital footprint, no social media, no photos from college, barely any public appearances. For someone from a prominent family, she's practically invisible. James scrolled through a series of search results that yielded almost nothing. Her college roommate died in a car accident her sophomore year. After that, Lena moved off campus, and there's virtually no record of her anywhere until she graduated. Adrian frowned. Maybe she values privacy. Maybe. Or maybe someone scrubbed her history. James met his eyes. I'm not saying she's definitely working with Victor. I'm saying we don't know enough about her to trust her. And until we do, assume she reports everything you do back to him. It made sense. Adrian had already decided to keep Lena at arm's length. Now he had another reason. Fine. I'll be careful around her. Anything else? Yeah. Victor's invited you to dinner tomorrow night. His place. Said it's just family. Adrian's jaw tightened. The thought of sitting across from his father's murderer and pretending everything was normal made his skin crawl. But James was right. They couldn't let Victor know they suspected anything. Tell him I'll be there. After James left, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at nothing. His father's face kept surfacing in his memory. Thomas Voss had been hard, cold, sometimes cruel. He'd raised Adrian to be the same, to see emotion as weakness and trust as a liability. But he'd been Adrian's father, and Victor had murdered him. The rage that filled Adrian was clean and precise. Not hot fury, but ice-cold determination. Victor wanted to play games? Fine. Adrian had learned from the best. He'd dismantle his uncle piece by piece. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Adrian checked the time, nearly 3 a.m. Who the hell was awake? Come in. The door opened slowly. Lena stood in the doorway, wrapped in a robe that was too big for her, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked even smaller than usual, hesitant. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I saw your light on. I didn't mean to disturb you. It's fine. What do you need? She twisted the robe's belt in her hands. I couldn't sleep. I was going to the library to find a book, but I heard voices and thought maybe... She trailed off, not meeting his eyes. You thought you'd check on me? A tiny nod. Adrian studied her. She looked genuinely concerned. Or maybe she was just a good actress. Victor would have chosen someone convincing. I'm fine. Just working late. You work every night until 3 or 4 a.m. She said it quietly, like she wasn't sure she should be speaking at all. That can't be healthy. How do you know when I work? She flushed, ducking her head. I'm sorry, I don't mean to spy, I notice things. I hear you in the halls sometimes, or I see your office light from the gardens. You go to the gardens at night? Sometimes, when I can't sleep. She was still twisting the belt, winding it around her fingers. I'm sorry, I should go. Wait. Adrian didn't know why he stopped her. Maybe exhaustion was making him careless. Maybe he was curious about this strange, quiet girl who noticed things. Since you're here, I have a question. She looked up, surprised. Why did you agree to this marriage? Silence stretched between them. Lena's hands went still on the belt. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when your father decides something. She wrapped her arms around herself. He said it was a good match, that your family was powerful, that this would secure our company's future. He didn't ask what I wanted. And what did you want? She looked at him then, really looked at him, and again he saw that flicker of something in her eyes. Something that wasn't fear or submission. It doesn't matter what I wanted. It never has. There was weight in those words, years of resignation and learned helplessness. Adrian recognized it because he'd seen it before in people his father had broken. Employees who'd learned that fighting back only made things worse, that survival meant compliance. Your father hits you. It wasn't a question. Lena's face went carefully blank. He doesn't. Don't lie to me. She flinched, then caught herself. He has expectations. When I don't meet them, he expresses his disappointment. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. It could be worse. She said it like she believed it, like she'd convinced herself that whatever happened behind closed doors in the Hart Mansion was somehow acceptable. He only does it when I embarrass him publicly, or when I talk back, or... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter anymore. I don't live there now. Adrian felt something twist in his chest, not quite sympathy, but close. He'd thought Lena was just timid by nature. Turned out she'd been systematically taught to make herself small. He can't touch you here. I know. She offered a weak smile. Thank you for that. For giving me my own space, for not expecting things. I told you this was a business arrangement. I know, but not everyone would honor that. She pulled the robe tighter. I should let you work. I'm sorry I interrupted. Lena. He waited until she paused at the door. If you notice anything strange around the house, people who don't belong, unusual activity, anything, tell me. She nodded, confused but agreeable. Okay. After she left, Adrian sat back in his chair, reconsidering James's suspicion. Lena didn't seem like a spy. She seemed like someone who'd been brutalized into compliance, who'd learned that invisibility was survival. Victor wouldn't choose someone like that for infiltration. Too passive, too fragile. Unless that was exactly the point, make her seem harmless, easily dismissed, so no one would suspect her. Adrian rubbed his eyes. He was too tired to think straight. Tomorrow, he'd deal with Victor's dinner invitation. Tonight, he needed sleep. He found himself wondering if Lena ever slept, or if she spent every night wandering the house like a ghost, looking for books she probably didn't read. Then he dismissed the thought. Her insomnia wasn't his problem. He had a murderer to catch. The next evening, Adrian dressed for dinner at Victor's penthouse with the same attention he'd give a hostile takeover. Suit perfectly tailored. Watch that cost more than a car. Mask firmly in place. Victor lived in a building that catered to people who thought money could buy taste. All glass and steel and views that were supposed to be impressive. Adrian had always found it cold, sterile. His father had hated visiting, called it a monument to empty status. Now, knowing what Victor had done, Adrian hated it too. The penthouse elevator required a key card. Adrian used his. Victor had given him one years ago, back when Adrian still thought his uncle was family. The doors opened directly into the apartment. Marble floors, modern art that probably cost millions, furniture that looked uncomfortable. Victor waited in the living room, drink in hand, smile ready. Adrian, right on time. Can I get you something? Whiskey. Neat. While Victor prepared the drink, Adrian studied the space. Security cameras in corners, carefully hidden but present. Listening devices? Probably. Victor was paranoid enough to bug his own home. Here. Victor handed him the glass. Macallan, 30 years. Your father's favorite. Adrian took it without reaction, though the mention of his father made his jaw tight. You said this was just family dinner. It is. Just you and me, the way it used to be. Victor settled into an armchair that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. We haven't had much time to talk since the wedding. How's married life treating you? Fine. Just fine? Come on, Adrian. I know the marriage was arranged, but Lena seems like a sweet girl. Surely you're finding some common ground. We have an understanding. She stays out of my way. I stay out of hers. Victor's smile faltered slightly. That's a cold approach to marriage. It's a business arrangement. Cold is appropriate. Adrian sipped his whiskey. Why the sudden interest in my personal life? I'm your uncle. I care about your happiness. Since when? The question hung in the air between them. Victor's smile turned brittle. Since your father died and I realized how alone you were. Thomas was my brother. Watching out for you is the least I can do. Adrian wanted to throw the whiskey in Victor's face. Instead, he kept his expression neutral. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. Are you? Because the board's been talking. They're worried about the recent losses, the shipment, the financial irregularities. They're questioning your leadership. There it was, the real reason for this dinner. Victor planting seeds of doubt, making Adrian feel unstable. The losses are being addressed, Adrian said evenly. We've identified the source of the financial irregularities and are taking corrective action. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Surprise, quickly masked. Oh? That's good news. Who was responsible? Several people. I'm handling it. But surely you can tell me, Bate, it's under control. Adrian met his uncle's gaze steadily. Unless you don't trust me to manage my own company? Victor raised his hands in surrender. Of course I trust you. I just want to help. Your father would have wanted me to guide you through these difficult times. My father wanted a lot of things. Adrian set down his glass. But he's dead and I'm running the company now. I don't need guidance. Adrian, was there something specific you wanted to discuss? Or is this just a social call? Victor's mask slipped completely for just a moment. Adrian saw frustration, calculation, something that might have been fear. Then the smile returned, forced and tight. Just checking in on family, making sure you're okay. Victor stood. Why don't we eat? I had my chef prepare something special. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Multiple courses, expensive wine, conversation that danced around everything important. Victor kept probing about the company, about Adrian's investigation, about Lena. Adrian deflected every question, gave nothing away. By the time he left, well past midnight, Adrian's jaw hurt from maintaining his pleasant expression. He called James from the car. Victor's panicking. He knows we're investigating. How? I mentioned we'd identified the source of the financial irregularities. He tried to seem casual, but he's worried. Adrian watched the city slide past the window. We need to move faster. If he starts destroying evidence, way ahead of you. I've been copying everything to secure servers he can't access. And I found something else. James paused. One of Victor's shell companies owns a pharmaceutical distribution firm. Guess what they distribute? Digoxin. Among other things, I'm tracking shipments now, seeing if we can tie any directly to your father's doctor. Adrian closed his eyes. The pieces were falling into place, building a picture of murder and theft and betrayal. Good work. What about Lena? Still looking, but I did find something interesting. Her college roommate, the one who died in the car accident? It wasn't an accident. Police suspected brake tampering, but couldn't prove it. The investigation went nowhere. Someone killed her roommate. Maybe, or maybe it really was just faulty brakes. But combined with Lena's total disappearance from public records after that, James trailed off. I don't know what it means yet. Neither did Adrian, but something about it bothered him, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. When he arrived home, the house was dark except for a single light in the library. Adrian almost went to his office, then changed direction, curious. Lena sat curled in an oversized chair, book in her lap, lost in whatever she was reading. She looked different like this. Relaxed, guard down, almost peaceful. She jumped when she noticed him in the doorway. Sorry, I didn't hear you come in. It's fine. You're allowed to use the library. I know, She clutched the book tighter. How was your dinner? Tedious. Adrian moved into the room, drawn by something he couldn't name. What are you reading? She showed him the cover. Financial law. Specifically, corporate embezzlement and fraud. Adrian's entire body went still. Why are you reading about embezzlement? She flushed. I was curious. I heard the staff talking about the company's financial troubles, and I wanted to understand what was happening. That's none of your concern. I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. She started to put the book back. Wait. Adrian studied her more carefully. She was nervous, yes, but there was something else in her expression. Intelligence, curiosity. What did you learn? That embezzlement is usually an inside job. Someone with access, knowledge of the systems, ability to hide transactions. She spoke softly but clearly, like she'd actually understood what she'd read. The book says most companies don't discover it until significant damage is done because the perpetrator knows exactly how to avoid detection. That's correct. Is that what's happening to Voss Holdings? She looked up at him. I'm not trying to pry. If someone's stealing from you, you should know that the book says the best approach is to continue acting normal while building a case. Don't let them know you're investigating. Adrian sat down across from her slowly. You got all that from the book? I read fast. She ducked her head again, but not before he saw the flash of something sharp in her eyes. And I remember things, details, patterns. What else do you remember? She hesitated, then set the book aside. At the wedding reception, your uncle made 7 phone calls. Each time he stepped away from people, turned his back to the room, spoke for less than 3 minutes. That's unusual behavior for someone who's supposed to be celebrating. Adrian leaned forward. You notice that? I notice everything. People don't pay attention to me, so I pay attention to them. She twisted her hands together. I know I'm supposed to just be a silent wife who doesn't ask questions, but I can't help seeing things. What things? The way your uncle looks at you, like he's waiting for something, and the way the CFO avoids making eye contact when your name comes up, and the fact that 3 board members have been having private lunches together every Tuesday for the past month. She paused. I'm probably reading too much into things. I tend to do that. No. Adrian's mind raced. You're not. Tell me about the board members. For the next hour, Lena detailed observations she'd made, patterns in staff behavior, unusual visitors to the estate, conversations she'd overheard. She delivered each detail precisely, without embellishment or interpretation, just raw information. Adrian listened with growing disbelief. This timid, shy girl who could barely meet people's eyes had been cataloging intelligence about his company with the precision of a trained analyst. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. She looked genuinely confused by the question. Because you're my husband. Because your company is being attacked. Because… She stopped, bit her lip. Because I'm tired of being useless. You think you're useless? Everyone does. My father, your uncle, the staff here. They see someone small and quiet and assume there's nothing underneath. Her voice dropped even lower. Maybe they're right. They're not. Adrian stood, mind working through possibilities. Lena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is your father working with Victor? She blinked. Working with him, how? The marriage. Was it your father's idea or Victor's? Victor approached my father, proposed the merger, suggested the marriage would strengthen both companies. She frowned. Why? Because I think Victor is orchestrating something larger than just embezzlement, and I think he's using both of us as pieces in whatever game he's playing. Adrian studied her carefully. If I asked you to help me investigate, would you? Fear flashed across her face, genuine, instinctive fear. I don't know how to… You just spent an hour demonstrating exactly how observant you are. That's more valuable than you realize. He softened his tone slightly. I'm not asking you to do anything dangerous. Just keep noticing things. Keep listening. Tell me what you see. Well, why would you trust me? Honestly, I'm not sure I do. But I trust that you're smart enough to know that if Victor destroys me, your father's company goes down too. You have as much to lose as I do. She considered this, chewing her lower lip. What are you investigating? Adrian made a decision that was probably stupid, but felt necessary. I think Victor murdered my father and has been systematically stealing from the company. I think he arranged our marriage to tie me down with obligations and give him leverage through your family's contracts. And I think he's planning something that ends with him in control and me removed. Lena's eyes went wide. If that's true, it's true. I just need to prove it before he makes his move. Adrian moved closer. But I understand if you don't want to be involved. This could get dangerous. My whole life has been dangerous, she said quietly, just in different ways. She took a shaky breath. Okay, I'll help. Just tell me what to do. For now, nothing. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing, being invisible, being dismissed. Let people think you're just a shy little wife who doesn't understand business. Adrian pulled out his phone, sent a quick text to James. But pay attention to Victor. Note who he talks to, how often, what times. Same with the CFO and those board members. Patterns, routines, anything unusual. I can do that. And Lena? He waited until she met his eyes. Don't trust anyone except me and my head of security, James. Not the staff, not your father, not anyone. If Victor suspects you're helping me, I know, I'll be careful. She stood, smoothing down her robe. I should go. It's late. She made it to the door before Adrian spoke again. Your college roommate, the one who died, what really happened? Lena froze. It was a car accident. James thinks the brakes were tampered with. A long silence. When Lena finally turned back, her expression was completely empty. Sarah was going to report my father to the police. She'd seen the bruises, knew what was happening. She said she couldn't stand by and watch him hurt me anymore. Her voice was flat, mechanical. 3 days before she planned to file the report, her brakes failed on a mountain road. You think your father killed her? I think people who threaten powerful men tend to have accidents. Lena's hands were shaking now. I think Sarah died because she tried to help me. And I think I learned that staying small and quiet and invisible was the only way to stay alive. Adrian felt something crack in his chest. The same thing that had cracked when he'd realized Victor had murdered his father. Rage at people who used power to destroy others. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me valuable skills. She offered a bitter smile. I'm very good at being invisible now. She left before he could respond. Adrian stood alone in the library, reevaluating everything he thought he knew about his wife. Not a spy, not a plant. Just a survivor who'd learned to weaponize her own invisibility. He pulled out his phone, called James. Tell me you weren't planning to sleep tonight, James answered. I need you to dig deeper into Robert Hart. Everything. I want to know if he's got connections to Victor beyond the marriage contract. You think Hart's involved? I think he might have killed his daughter's roommate to protect his reputation, which means he's exactly the kind of man Victor would recruit. Adrian moved to the window, stared out at the dark grounds. And I think we've been making a mistake. What kind of mistake? Assuming Lena was a weakness Victor gave me, what if she's an asset he doesn't know about? James was quiet for a moment. You're trusting her. I'm using her, there's a difference. Adrian wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. She's observant, intelligent, and everyone underestimates her. That makes her valuable. Or it makes her a perfect double agent. Then we'll find out. Adrian ended the call, too tired to argue. He looked down at the gardens where Lena apparently wandered when she couldn't sleep. Wondered what it was like to be so afraid of the world that invisibility felt like safety. Wondered if she'd ever had a choice in any of this. The abuse, the roommate's death, the forced marriage. Wondered if he was making a terrible mistake by involving her in his war with Victor. Too late now. The pieces were in motion. All he could do was play the game better than his uncle and hope no one else died before it was over. Over the next 3 weeks, a strange partnership formed in the spaces between Adrian's war with Victor and the careful distance he maintained from everyone else. Lena started leaving notes, not obvious ones, nothing that would draw attention if someone found them. Just small observations tucked into books Adrian was reading, slipped under his office door late at night, left on his desk when the staff cleaned his room. Each note contained a single detail, precisely recorded. Victor visited the estate twice this week. Both times he spent 15 minutes alone in your father's old study. The staff said he was reminiscing. He took nothing visible, but the third drawer of the desk was open when he left. It's always locked. The CFO had lunch with board members Castellano, Wong, and Dimitri. They met at a restaurant 40 minutes outside the city. No security, no assistants, Wong paid in cash. Your uncle's driver picked up a package from a medical supply warehouse on Tuesday. Small box, handled carefully. The warehouse specializes in cardiac medications. Each note was unsigned, written in neat handwriting that looked almost childlike in its precision. Adrian started waiting for them, checking the usual drop points, feeling something almost like anticipation when he found new intelligence. James was less enthusiastic. "This is insane," he said, holding up the latest note. They were in Adrian's office at 2 in the morning, their usual meeting time now. "You're building a case against your uncle using information from a woman we know almost nothing about. What if she's feeding you exactly what Victor wants you to see? Then Victor's doing a terrible job because everything she's told us has checked out." Adrian pulled up files on his laptop. "The board members meeting? I had someone follow them. They spent 2 hours discussing how to remove me from the company. The medical warehouse? I sent someone to ask questions. That package was digoxin, same dosage that killed my father. Which could mean Lena's legitimate, or it could mean Victor's smart enough to verify the information he has her feed you." James tossed the note on the desk. "Have you considered that he might be setting you up? Building your trust in her so when he makes his real move, you won't see it coming?" Adrian had considered it, spent hours turning the possibility over in his mind, looking for cracks in Lena's story. But every time he thought he'd found one, she'd do something that contradicted the spy theory. Like the night he'd found her crying in the library over a book about domestic violence, or the morning she'd flinched so hard at a raised voice she'd dropped an entire breakfast tray. Those weren't performances. He knew what calculated deception looked like. Lena was genuinely traumatized, genuinely afraid. That didn't mean she couldn't be working with Victor, but it made it less likely. "I'm being careful," Adrian said. "I verify everything she tells me independently. I don't act on her information alone. And I don't tell her anything about our investigation that Victor doesn't already suspect." "You're rationalizing." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm using an asset that fell into my lap." Adrian closed the laptop. "Either way, we need her. She has access to parts of this house we can't monitor, and people talk around her like she's furniture. That's valuable." James didn't look convinced, but he dropped it. "Fine, but if this blows up in our faces, I'm saying I told you so." "Noted. What else do you have?" What James had was a paper trail that connected Victor to 6 different shell companies, all funneling money out of Voss Holdings over 3 years. The amounts were staggering, close to $400 million now, hidden so carefully that without James's team working around the clock, they'd never have found it. "He's not just stealing," James said, spreading out financial records. "He's building a war chest. Look at where the money's going. Real estate acquisitions, tech startups, manufacturing plants. He's creating a parallel empire." Adrian studied the documents, feeling cold certainty settle over him. "He's planning to take everything. Not just remove me from the company, but replace Voss Holdings entirely with his own operation. That's my read. And the timeline suggests he's close to making his move. Several of these acquisitions finalized in the last month." James pointed to a series of transactions. "He's accelerating. Because I started investigating. He knows I'm on to him, so he's rushing the endgame." Adrian stood, paced to the window. Outside, the grounds were dark except for security lights. Somewhere in the house, Lena was probably awake, reading or wandering or doing whatever she did when sleep wouldn't come. "We need to move first, hit him before he's ready." "With what?" "We have evidence of theft, but we can't prove he murdered your father. The medication tampering is circumstantial. A good lawyer could argue coincidence." "Then we get him to confess." James raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do we do that?" Adrian was already forming the plan, pieces clicking together with brutal clarity. "We make him think he's won. We stage my public failure so convincingly that he drops his guard. Then we record him admitting everything. That's risky as hell." "Everything about this is risky." Adrian turned back to his friend. "But if we wait for perfect evidence, he'll destroy us first. We need to force his hand now." They spent the next hour outlining the plan. It was dangerous, relied on timing and Victor's arrogance, and had about 50 ways it could go catastrophically wrong. But it was all they had. When James finally left, the sky was starting to lighten with approaching dawn. Adrian should have slept. He had meetings in 4 hours. But his mind was too wired, running through scenarios and contingencies. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Lena entered hesitantly, carrying a cup of tea. She'd started doing this recently, appearing in the early morning with tea or coffee, never staying long, never demanding conversation. Just a quiet presence that Adrian had started to find oddly comfortable. "I saw your light," she said, setting the cup on his desk. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you." He sipped it. Perfect temperature, the way he preferred. She'd noticed that too, apparently. "You're up early." "I never really sleep." She hovered near the door, uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "The notes I've been leaving, are they helping?" Adrian studied her. She looked genuinely anxious, like a student waiting to learn if she'd passed a test. "They're helping. Your observations have been remarkably accurate." Relief flooded her face. "I'm glad. I was worried I was seeing patterns that weren't there." "You're not. You have good instincts." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. There's something I need to ask you." She sat carefully, hands folded in her lap. "In the next few weeks, things are going to get complicated," Adrian said. "Victor's going to make his move against me, and I'm going to let him think he's succeeding. It might look like I'm failing, like the company's collapsing. I need you to know it's controlled. You're setting a trap." "Yes. And you're telling me because you're worried I'll panic and do something that gives away the plan." She said it matter-of-factly, without accusation. "Partially. But also because when things get bad, your father might contact you, try to convince you to leave me, divorce me before the company fails and takes the Hart family down with it." Lena's expression went very still. "You think my father's working with Victor?" "I think it's possible. The timing of the marriage proposal, the contracts, the way everything aligned, it feels coordinated." Adrian leaned forward. "If your father does contact you, I need to know what he says, what he offers, what he threatens." "You want me to spy on my own father?" "I want you to protect yourself, because if he's involved in this and things go wrong, he'll throw you under the bus without hesitation." She flinched, but didn't deny it. "He's always been good at that. Protecting himself, I mean." "Then help me protect you." Adrian kept his voice gentle. "Tell me what he says. Let me know if he pressures you to leave. And whatever you do, don't actually leave." "I won't." She met his eyes. "I meant my vows, even if they were just business. I don't run from fights anymore." Something in her voice made Adrian reassess her again. There was steel underneath the fear, strength buried under years of learned helplessness. He wondered what Lena would be like if she'd been raised differently, allowed to be confident instead of crushed into submission. "Good," he said, "because this is going to get ugly before it gets better." "I can handle ugly." She stood, moved toward the door, then paused. "Adrian, why are you really doing this? Fighting Victor, I mean. You could just take your money and walk away, start fresh somewhere else." "He killed my father." "I know, but is that really why? Or is it because he treated you like you were weak? Like you just roll over and accept being manipulated?" She looked back at him. "Because if it's the second thing, I understand that, better than you might think." Adrian didn't answer immediately. He told himself this was about justice, about avenging his father. But Lena's question cut closer to the truth. That Victor's dismissal of him, the assumption that Adrian would be easy to control and destroy, had ignited something deeper than grief. Rage at being underestimated, refusal to be broken. "Maybe it's both," he admitted finally. Lena nodded like that made sense. "Then we're fighting for the same reason. We're both tired of people thinking we're weak." She left before he could respond. Adrian sat alone with his tea, thinking about this strange girl who saw too much and said too little, wondering if involving her in this war was protection or manipulation, if he was saving her or just using her the way everyone else in her life had, wondering if the difference even mattered at this point. The next 3 weeks moved like a choreographed disaster. Adrian began making strategic mistakes, investments that looked impulsive, decisions that seemed emotional rather than calculated. Nothing too obvious, but enough to make the board nervous. At meetings, he let frustration show, snapped at people who questioned him, projected the image of a young heir cracking under pressure. Victor watched it all with barely concealed satisfaction. The board members Lena had identified, Castellano, Wong, and Dimitri, started whispering campaigns about Adrian's incompetence. Questions were raised about his leadership, his judgment, his ability to fill his father's shoes. Stock prices dipped. Partners began hedging their bets. Through it all, James worked in the shadows, building the case, preparing the trap. And Lena kept leaving notes. She'd been right about her father. 2 weeks into the plan, Robert Hart requested a private lunch with his daughter. Lena went, wearing the demure mask Adrian had seen at their first meeting, and came back with information that confirmed their suspicions. "He wants me to file for divorce," she told Adrian that night, sitting in his office with her hands twisted together. "Said the Voss empire is collapsing and I need to distance myself before it takes our family down. He's already talked to lawyers." "Did he say how he knew the company was in trouble?" "He said everyone knows, that it's obvious." She paused. "But the way he talked about it, he wasn't worried or surprised. He was prepared, like he'd been expecting this." "Because Victor told him it was coming." Adrian made notes on his laptop. "What else?" "He said if I don't file within 2 weeks, he'll cut me off from the family completely. No money, no support, no contact." Her voice was steady, but Adrian saw her hands shaking. "He said I was being foolish, that loyalty to you would destroy me." "Are you afraid he's right?" She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, there was no fear in her expression, just determination. "I'm afraid of a lot of things, but staying with you isn't one of them." Adrian felt something shift in his chest, not quite trust, but close. "Your father's going to be furious when this is over and he realizes he backed the wrong side." "Good." Lena's voice was cold. "Let him be furious. Let him realize what it feels like to be powerless." They worked together more openly after that. Adrian stopped pretending she was just a convenient observer and started treating her like an actual partner. He showed her the financial evidence, explained the trap they were setting, walked her through the endgame. Lena absorbed it all with that same precise attention she gave everything, asking sharp questions that made Adrian reconsider his assumptions. "If Victor's building a parallel empire," she said one night, studying the shell company documents, "he must have investors, people who believe in his vision enough to fund it. Who are they?" Adrian pulled up another file. "We've identified 3 major investors, all foreign, all with connections to industries Voss Holdings operates in. What if you approach them directly? Showed them evidence that Victor's been stealing? If they think their investment is based on stolen money, they might pull out." "That could work, but it tips our hand. Victor would know we've uncovered everything." "Not if you do it at the right moment." Lena traced patterns on the desk, thinking, "Wait until just before you spring the trap. Contact the investors, show them the evidence, let them panic. Victor will be scrambling to manage that crisis when you hit him with the confession recording." It was brilliant, simple, devastating, and it used Victor's own arrogance against him. Adrian stared at her. "Where the hell did you learn to think like this?" "From watching my father." She smiled without humor. "He's been playing power games my entire life. I learned to recognize the patterns." "You're wasted as a trophy wife." "I know." She met his eyes. "Maybe after this is over, I can be something else." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Adrian couldn't quite name. Not attraction, or not just that. Recognition, maybe. The understanding between 2 people who'd been underestimated their entire lives and were finally done accepting it. He looked away first. "We should finalize the timeline. Victor's getting impatient." They worked until dawn again, planning each step with surgical precision. At some point, Lena fell asleep in the chair, head pillowed on her arms, exhausted. Adrian found himself studying her in the early light, the delicate features she'd been taught to hide, the intelligence she'd learned to mask. He draped his jacket over her shoulders and went back to work. When she woke 2 hours later, she found him still at the laptop, tie loosened, hair disheveled from running his hands through it. She straightened, wincing at the crick in her neck. "Sorry," she mumbled. "Didn't mean to fall asleep. It's fine. You were up most of the night." Adrian saved his work, closed the laptop. "I'm going to rest for a few hours before the board meeting. You should too." "Adrian?" She stopped him at the door. "Thank you for trusting me with this. I know it's a risk." "You've earned it." He meant it. Over the past weeks, Lena had proven herself more reliable than half his executive team. "Just don't make me regret it." "I won't." She hesitated, then added quietly, "And for what it's worth, I'm glad I married you, even if it was forced. You're nothing like I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone like my father, or Victor, men who use power to hurt people." She pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders. "But you're different. You use it to protect things. That matters." She left before he could respond, taking his jacket with her. Adrian stood in the empty office, feeling something crack further in the walls he'd built around himself. Lena was right. He wasn't like his father or Victor. He'd spent his whole life trying to prove he could be just as hard, just as ruthless. But the truth was, he couldn't. He cared too much, felt too deeply, wanted too badly to believe people could be better than their worst impulses. His father had called it weakness. Victor called it naivety. Maybe Lena was the first person who'd ever called it strength. The board meeting that afternoon was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Adrian walked in looking like he hadn't slept in days, which wasn't far from the truth, and immediately went on the offensive. He snapped at questions, dismissed concerns, made decisions that seemed increasingly erratic. The board members exchanged worried glances. Victor sat at the far end of the table, saying nothing, watching everything with that small smile Adrian had learned to hate. "The quarterly numbers are down 15%, Castellano said, trying to sound concerned rather than gleeful. "Mr. Voss, don't you think we need to reevaluate our current strategy?" "I think we need to stop second-guessing every decision I make," Adrian shot back. "My father built this company on bold moves, not committee consensus." "Your father also built it on sound judgment," Wong added, "something that seems to be lacking lately." "Are you questioning my judgment?" "We're questioning whether you're fit to lead during this crisis." The room went silent. It was the first time anyone had directly challenged Adrian's position. He saw Victor lean forward slightly, interested. "If you have concerns about my leadership," Adrian said coldly, "file them formally with the board. Otherwise, shut up and do your jobs." He stood, gathered his materials, and walked out without another word. Behind him, he heard the explosion of voices, shock, outrage, vindication. Perfect. James was waiting in the hallway. "Think you oversold it?" "No, Victor needs to believe I'm losing control." Adrian kept walking. "How long before they call for a vote of no confidence?" "I'd give it 2 days. 3 at most." "Good. That gives us time to contact the investors and set the final pieces." Adrian checked his watch. "Is everything ready on your end?" "Recording equipment is in place. I've got teams monitoring Victor's communications. The second he makes contact with his people about moving against you, we'll know." James fell into step beside him. "You sure about the timing?" "As sure as I can be." Which wasn't very, but they were committed now. "What about security?" "If this goes wrong and Victor realizes we've been playing him..." "I've tripled security around the estate. No one gets in or out without my clearance, and I've got people watching Victor 24/7. James paused. "What about Lena?" "What about her?" "If things go sideways, she's vulnerable. Victor could use her as leverage." Adrian had thought about that. Spent hours worrying about it, actually, which was new and uncomfortable. "She stays in the estate under guard until this is over. I'll tell her it's for her safety." "Will she listen?" "She'd better." But when Adrian found Lena in the library that evening and told her about the new security protocols, she surprised him by arguing. "I need to meet with my father one more time," she said, "before everything explodes. He's going to call me after today's board meeting, and if I refuse to see him, he'll know something's wrong." "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. He's my father. He won't hurt me in public." She saw Adrian's expression and amended, "He won't hurt me badly enough to leave marks that people would notice. And I can get information we need, confirmation that he's coordinating with Victor, details about their plan." "The answer is no." "Adrian, I said no." He heard his voice rise and forced it down. "I'm not risking you for information we can get other ways." Lena stared at him. "You're protecting me." "I'm protecting an asset." "No, you're not." She moved closer, searching his face. "You actually care what happens to me." Adrian wanted to deny it, to say she was just useful and that's why he wanted her safe. But Lena had gotten good at reading him these past weeks, and she'd see through the lie. "Don't read too much into it," he said instead. "I don't like when bad things happen to people who don't deserve them." "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." She said it without irony, like it was simple truth. And it's why I'm going to meet with my father anyway, because you need that information, and I'm the only one who can get it. Lena, I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. She straightened her shoulders, and Adrian saw a glimpse of who she might have been if her father hadn't spent years crushing her spirit. You can have security follow me if it makes you feel better, but I'm doing this. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Adrian swore under his breath. Fine, but James's best people go with you, and if your father so much as looks at you wrong, they pull you out. Understood? Understood. And Lena? He caught her arm as she turned to leave. If this goes bad, if you're in any danger at all, you run. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to get more information. Just run. She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. I will. I promise. He didn't believe her, but he let her go anyway. The meeting with Robert Hart happened 2 days later at the same restaurant where he'd met with Victor's board members. Lena wore a pale blue dress that made her look even smaller than usual, styled her hair to hide her face, and walked in looking every inch the timid daughter. James had 3 people in the restaurant: waitstaff, diners, a busboy, all armed, all ready to intervene if necessary. Adrian watched via camera feed from James's surveillance van, parked 2 blocks away, and tried not to let his anxiety show. Robert stood when Lena arrived, kissed her cheek with apparent affection. From the audio feed, Adrian heard him order wine, make small talk about the weather, playing the concerned father. It made Adrian's skin crawl. So, Robert said once they'd ordered, have you thought about what we discussed? The divorce? Lena's voice was soft, hesitant, perfect performance. Father, I don't know if I can do that. Sweetheart, I understand you feel some loyalty to Adrian, but he's drowning, and if you stay attached to him, you'll drown too. Robert reached across the table, took her hand. I'm trying to protect you. I know, but maybe things will get better. Maybe Adrian can turn the company around. Robert's expression hardened. He can't, trust me on this. Voss Holdings is finished. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen the internal numbers. The company's bleeding money, making terrible decisions, losing partners daily. It's only a matter of time before it collapses completely. In the van, Adrian leaned closer to the screen. Ask him how he saw the numbers, he muttered. As if she'd heard him, Lena tilted her head. But how would you see internal numbers from Voss Holdings, unless... She trailed off, eyes widening with apparent realization. Father, are you involved in what's happening to Adrian's company? I'm involved in protecting our family's interests, Robert said smoothly, which sometimes means making hard choices. Like working with Victor Voss to destroy his nephew? Robert went very still. Who told you that? No one told me. I just pay attention. Lena pulled her hand back. You've been meeting with him for months. I've seen the phone records, the calendar appointments you thought I didn't notice. You're helping him steal from the company. You don't understand what you're talking about. I understand perfectly. Lena's voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath now. Victor wants to take over Voss Holdings. He's been stealing money to build his own empire, and you've been helping him because he promised you a piece when he succeeds. That's why you pushed for the marriage, to give Victor leverage over Adrian through me. Robert's face flushed with anger. Watch your tone, Lena. Or what? You'll hit me? We're in public, Father. You can't maintain your respectable image if you assault your daughter in front of witnesses. You ungrateful little... I'm not ungrateful. I'm just finally seeing clearly. Lena stood, gathering her purse. And I'm not divorcing Adrian. I'm staying right where I am and watching you and Victor fail. She walked out before Robert could respond. In the van, James let out a low whistle. That girl has more spine than half your board. Adrian couldn't speak. He'd watched Lena transform from frightened daughter to someone powerful and controlled, had seen her push back against her abuser for probably the first time in her life. And she'd gotten the confession they needed, Robert admitting he was working with Victor, confirming the entire conspiracy. By the time Lena reached the van, Adrian was outside waiting for her. She looked shaky but triumphant, adrenaline making her movements jerky. Did you get it? She asked. Was the audio clear? Every word. Adrian found himself pulling her into an embrace before he could think better of it. You were incredible. She froze for a second, then slowly relaxed against him. I was terrified the whole time. You didn't show it. Years of practice. She pulled back, looked up at him. Is it enough? Can we use it? Combined with everything else, yes. We have Victor and your father on conspiracy to commit fraud and theft. Adrian felt victory so close he could taste it. Now we just need to get Victor to confess to the murder. That part would be harder. But they were closer than ever. As they drove back to the estate, Lena sat quietly, processing what she'd done. Adrian watched her from the corner of his eye, seeing the girl who'd trembled at her wedding transform into someone strong enough to face down her abuser. You know you can't go back to him now, Adrian said. Your father, I mean, even after this is over. I know. Lena didn't sound upset about it. I don't want to. I'm done with that life. What will you do instead? She looked at him, considering. I don't know yet, but for the first time I get to decide. That's enough for now. Adrian nodded slowly. When this was over, if they survived it, he'd make sure Lena had the resources to build whatever life she wanted. It was the least he could do for someone who'd risked everything to help him, even if part of him wondered what it would mean if the life she chose didn't include him. The board called for the emergency meeting exactly 72 hours after Lena's confrontation with her father. Adrian walked into the conference room knowing this was it, the moment Victor had been orchestrating for 3 years. The 11 board members sat around the table like a jury, and Victor stood at the head, expression carefully neutral, but eyes gleaming with barely concealed triumph. Thank you for coming, Adrian, Victor said, as if Adrian had a choice. Please, sit. Adrian remained standing. What's this about? Castellano cleared his throat. We've called this meeting to discuss a vote of no confidence. Given recent events, the financial losses, the erratic decision-making, the declining stock prices, we feel it's necessary to reevaluate your position as CEO. You're trying to remove me. Adrian kept his voice flat, emotionless. Inside, his heart pounded. Everything depended on the next 30 minutes. We're trying to save the company your father built, Wong said, and we don't believe you're capable of doing that anymore. So what's the alternative? Victor takes over? Adrian looked at his uncle. That's what this is about, isn't it? You've been poisoning them against me, waiting for the right moment to make your move. Adrian, please. Victor spread his hands in a placating gesture. No one's been poisoned against you. We're all concerned about the company's future. If you just step aside temporarily, let me help stabilize things. The way you helped my father? Adrian let the question hang in the air. Something flickered in Victor's expression. Your father died of a heart attack. What are you implying? I'm implying that it's convenient how you've positioned yourself to take over exactly when the company seems weakest, almost like you planned it. The room erupted in murmurs. Victor's smile tightened. That's a serious accusation. I hope you have evidence to back it up, or this could be considered slander. Adrian had evidence, had enough to destroy Victor completely, but not yet. He needed Victor confident, needed him to think he'd won so thoroughly that he'd let his guard down completely. I have nothing, Adrian said, letting defeat color his voice. Just suspicions and paranoia. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not fit to lead. Victor's eyes sharpened with interest. Are you saying you'll step down? I'm saying I'm tired of fighting battles on every front. Adrian slumped into a chair, the picture of exhaustion. Do what you want. Take the company. I don't care anymore. The board members exchanged glances. This wasn't the Adrian they'd been dealing with, the one who snapped and fought and refused to back down. This was surrender, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. We don't want to force you out, Dmitri said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But if you're willing to step aside voluntarily, we could structure this as a leave of absence. You'd retain your shares, your position on the board, just not the day-to-day operations. And Victor would take over as acting CEO, Adrian said flatly. Temporarily, Victor added quickly. Just until the company stabilizes, then we can reevaluate. They were lying. Adrian saw it in every face around the table. Victor had no intention of giving control back. This was a coup, dressed up as concern for the company's welfare. Fine, Adrian said. Draw up the paperwork. I'll sign whatever you need. Victory flashed across Victor's face, quickly masked. I think that's the right decision, Adrian, for everyone involved. There's one condition. Adrian looked directly at his uncle. I want a private conversation with you first. Uncle to nephew. before this becomes official." Victor hesitated, clearly weighing whether it was a trap. But his arrogance won out. He thought Adrian was beaten, broken, no longer a threat. "Of course. We can talk in your father's old office." Perfect. James had that office wired 6 ways to Sunday. They left the board to draft the transition documents and walked in silence to the executive floor. Adrian's father's office had been left untouched since his death, a shrine to Thomas Voss's legacy, all dark wood and leather and the faint smell of expensive cigars. Victor closed the door behind them, and his mask finally dropped. The concerned uncle vanished, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. "You made the right choice," he said, moving to the bar to pour himself a drink. "If you'd fought this, things would have gotten ugly." "Uglier than stealing $400 million from your own brother's company?" Adrian watched his uncle's hand freeze on the whiskey bottle. "Or did you think I didn't know about that?" Victor turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" "The shell companies, the overseas accounts, the systematic theft you've been conducting for 3 years." Adrian moved closer. "I know everything, Victor. I've known for weeks. If that were true, you'd have gone to the authorities." "I wanted to understand why first. Why steal from the company when you could have just asked for a bigger stake? Why go through the elaborate charade?" Adrian paused. "Then I realized you didn't just want money. You wanted control. You wanted to build something that was yours, not Thomas's legacy. You wanted to erase my father completely." Victor's expression went very cold. "Your father was a tyrant who treated everyone around him like tools, including you. I did you a favor. By killing him?" The words dropped like a bomb. Victor went completely still. "That's a hell of an accusation," he said softly. "You'd better be able to prove it." "Digoxin overdose. 3 times the therapeutic level in his system when he died. The medical examiner ruled it heart failure because the symptoms match, but it was murder." Adrian kept his voice steady, despite the rage burning in his chest. "You had access to his medication through that pharmaceutical company you own. You had motive. His death made your takeover easier, and you had opportunity. You visited him the day he died. So did half a dozen other people. That proves nothing. Combined with everything else, the theft, the manipulation, the conspiracy with Robert Hart?" Adrian pulled out his phone, pulled up the recording of Robert's confession. "It proves enough." He played 30 seconds, just enough for Victor to hear Robert admitting they were working together to destroy Adrian. Victor's face went through several expressions: shock, fury, calculation. "Where did you get that?" "My wife recorded her father 2 days ago. Turns out that shy little girl you helped force on me is a lot more capable than anyone realized." Adrian pocketed the phone. "She's been watching you, Victor, noticing things, and she doesn't like what she sees. That recording won't hold up in court. It's probably inadmissible. I don't need it to hold up in court. I just need it to convince your investors that their money is funding a criminal enterprise." Adrian smiled without humor. "I contacted them yesterday, showed them evidence of the theft, explained where their capital is really coming from. They're pulling out, all of them." Victor's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your accounts. See how much liquidity you have left." Adrian watched understanding dawn in his uncle's eyes. "Without those investors, your parallel empire collapses. The shell companies fold. The acquisitions fall through. Everything you built disappears." "You little bastard!" Victor's voice shook with rage. "You think you've won? I still have the board. I still have control of this company. For about another hour, until I present them with evidence of your theft and conspiracy. Then you have nothing except a prison sentence." Adrian moved closer. "But I'll give you an alternative. Confess. Admit what you did to my father, to the company, all of it. I'll record it, take it to the authorities, and maybe, the prosecutor will consider your cooperation when determining your sentence." "You want me to confess to murder?" Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll make sure you get the maximum sentence for every crime you've committed. I'll use every resource I have to ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison. But if you cooperate, admit everything, you might get out before you die." Adrian paused. "It's not mercy. It's just math. You're 63. Fight this and you'll die in prison. Cooperate and you might see freedom again." Victor stared at him, and Adrian saw the exact moment his uncle realized he'd lost. That all his planning, all his manipulation had led to this, his nephew offering him the only way out of complete destruction. "You're more like your father than I thought," Victor said bitterly. "No. My father would have destroyed you without offering any deal." Adrian pulled out his phone again, set it to record. "I'm giving you a choice. That's more than you gave him." Silence stretched between them. Outside the windows, the city sprawled in afternoon light, indifferent to the drama playing out 40 stories above. Finally, Victor sat down heavily in Thomas's old chair. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth. All of it. Start with why you killed my father." Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was empty of everything except tired resignation. "Because I was tired of being second. Tired of watching Thomas take credit for work I did, decisions I made. He built this company, sure, but I expanded it. I made it what it is today. And he treated me like an employee. So you murdered him. I helped him along." Victor's smile was grim. His heart was already failing. "I just accelerated the process. Small adjustments to his medication over several months. Increased the dosage gradually so no one would notice. Then a final push the day before he died." Adrian felt sick hearing it said so casually, like Victor was describing a business transaction rather than fratricide. "And the theft?" "Insurance. I knew Thomas would never give me what I deserved, so I took it. Built my own operation with company money, positioned myself to take over when he was gone." Victor looked up at Adrian. "You were supposed to be easy to control. Young, inexperienced, grieving. I thought you'd lean on me, trust my advice, never question anything. But you turned out to be stubborn like your father." "I'm nothing like my father." "You're exactly like him. Same ruthlessness hidden under a civilized surface, same willingness to destroy anyone who threatens you." Victor gestured at the phone. "You think offering me a deal makes you better than Thomas? You're just using a different method to get the same result, my complete defeat. The difference is, I'm not killing you." Adrian stopped the recording, sent it to James immediately. "And I'm giving you a chance to take responsibility for what you've done." "How generous." Victor stood slowly, looking older than Adrian had ever seen him. "What happens now?" "Now I call the authorities. You'll be arrested, charged with murder, fraud, theft. The board will be informed. The company will issue a statement." Adrian moved to the door. "And I'll make sure everyone knows that I'm nothing like my father, that I believe in accountability, even for family." "Adrian," Victor's voice stopped him at the threshold. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not for what I did to Thomas. He deserved what he got, but for underestimating you. You would have made a good partner if I'd approached you honestly." "We'll never know." Adrian opened the door. 2 police officers stood waiting with James. Apparently his head of security had called them the moment the recording started uploading. "Officers, Victor Voss has a confession to make regarding the murder of Thomas Voss and multiple counts of corporate fraud." Victor didn't resist as they read him his rights and led him away. He walked out of Thomas Voss's office with his head high, maintaining dignity even in defeat. Adrian watched him go and felt nothing except exhaustion. James approached once the officers were gone. "You got it all?" "Every word. Murder confession, theft admission, the whole thing." Adrian rubbed his face. "Contact the board. Tell them there's been a development they need to hear about." "Already done. They're waiting in the conference room." James hesitated. "You okay?" "Ask me in a week." Adrian started toward the conference room, then stopped. "Where's Lena?" "Safe in the estate. I have 5 people watching her in case Victor had any contingency plans we didn't know about." "Good. Let her know it's over. And tell her—" Adrian paused, unsure what message to send. "Thank you" seemed inadequate. "You were right to trust me, felt presumptuous. Tell her I'll explain everything when I get home." James nodded and stepped away to make the call. Adrian took a moment to steady himself, then walked into the conference room to face the board. They looked up as he entered, expressions ranging from confusion to concern to suspicion. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, taking his seat at the head of the table, "we need to discuss some recent developments regarding Victor Voss and his activities within this company." He spent the next 2 hours laying out everything: the theft, the murder, the conspiracy with Robert Hart. He played them excerpts from the recordings, showed them the financial evidence James had compiled, walked them through 3 years of systematic betrayal. By the end, the board members looked shell-shocked. Castellano couldn't seem to find words. We had no idea. If we'd known, you would have done exactly what Victor counted on you doing. Question my leadership, push for change, create the chaos he needed to take control. Adrian kept his voice even, professional. He played all of us. The difference is I figured it out in time to stop him. What about the vote of no confidence? Wong asked quietly. I assume it's withdrawn. Adrian met each board member's eyes. Unless anyone still believes I'm unfit to lead? Silence. Then Dmitri spoke up. I think we owe you an apology, Mr. Voss. We should have trusted you. You should have investigated before making accusations. Adrian stood. But that's in the past. Moving forward, I expect this board to actually do its job, provide oversight, ask hard questions, demand accountability. But question my competence again without evidence, and I'll replace every one of you. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, and they knew it. The meeting dissolved shortly after, board members filing out with muttered apologies and uncomfortable glances. Adrian sat alone in the conference room for a long time, letting the reality sink in. He'd won. Victor was arrested, the company was safe, the conspiracy was exposed. So why did he feel so empty? His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. James told me, "Are you okay?" Adrian stared at the message, not sure how to answer. Was he okay? His uncle was going to prison for murdering his father. He'd just threatened his entire board. His marriage was still a business arrangement with an expiration date he hadn't considered until now. He typed back, "Coming home. We need to talk." The drive back to the estate took 40 minutes through rush hour traffic. Adrian spent it staring out the window, mind racing through everything that had happened, everything that still needed to happen. The company would need a press release. The authorities would want additional statements. The media would descend like vultures. And somewhere in all of that, he needed to figure out what came next with Lena. She was waiting in the library when he arrived, curled in her usual chair but looking anything but relaxed. She stood as soon as she saw him, hands twisting together. "Is it really over?" she asked. "Victor's in custody. Robert Hart is being questioned as an accomplice. The board's been informed." Adrian collapsed onto the couch across from her. "It's over." "Then why do you look like you lost?" Adrian laughed without humor. "Because I just learned my uncle murdered my father, stole $400 million, and manipulated everyone around him for 3 years. Winning doesn't make that hurt less." Lena moved to sit beside him, close but not touching. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I am." "You have nothing to apologize for. You helped me stop him." Adrian looked at her. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have. You just would have taken longer." She offered a small smile. "I just sped things up." "You did more than that. You risked your relationship with your father, put yourself in danger, stood up to people who've spent your whole life teaching you to be small." Adrian reached for her hand without thinking about it. "You were brave." I was terrified every second, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I kept thinking about what would happen if we failed. If Victor won and you lost everything. If my father found out I'd betrayed him. What would have happened? He would have killed me." She said it simply, matter-of-factly. Not immediately, but eventually, an accident like what happened to Sarah. He doesn't tolerate disloyalty. Adrian's grip tightened on her hand. "He can't touch you now. With his connection to Victor exposed, he's facing criminal charges. And even if he wasn't, I wouldn't let him near you." "Why?" Lena looked at him with genuine confusion. "I'm just your business arrangement wife. Once this settles down, we can divorce, and you can move on with your life." The words hit Adrian harder than he expected. Divorce. Of course. That's what they'd agreed to. A marriage in name only. An arrangement that served its purpose and would dissolve when no longer needed. Except somewhere between the late-night strategy sessions and the shared danger and the moment he'd watched Lena stand up to her abuser, Adrian had stopped thinking of her as just an arrangement. What if I don't want to divorce? The words came out before he could stop them. Lena went very still. What? I mean, Adrian tried to organize thoughts that were suddenly chaotic. We make a good team. You're intelligent, observant, capable, and you understand what it's like to survive people like Victor and your father. I think, if you wanted, we could make this marriage real. Real how? Real as in actual partners. Not just business, but he struggled to articulate something he barely understood himself. I don't know what I'm asking. I just know that when I think about you leaving, about going back to living alone in this house, it feels wrong. Lena pulled her hand away slowly. You're confused. You've been through trauma, and I helped you, and now you're conflating gratitude with something else. I'm not confused. Yes, you are. She stood, wrapped her arms around herself. Adrian, you don't want me. You want someone who isn't afraid of their own shadow, who doesn't flinch at raised voices, who can actually be a proper wife. I'm broken. My father made sure of that. You're not broken. You're surviving. Adrian stood too. And I don't want some perfect woman who's never struggled. You want what? She spun to face him. Someone who understands you? Someone who won't leave? Someone who'll continue to be useful? Her voice cracked. I can't be your replacement for everything you lost. I can't fix the damage Victor did, or bring your father back, or make you feel less alone. That's not fair to either of us. Adrian stared at her, seeing the fear in her eyes, fear that had nothing to do with physical danger and everything to do with emotional vulnerability. This isn't about fixing anything. This is about not wanting to lose something good that we've built together. We built a partnership based on necessity and mutual benefit. That's different from a marriage. Lena moved toward the door. I think we both need time to process everything that's happened. We can talk about this later when things aren't so... Lena, stop. Adrian crossed the space between them. I know I'm doing this badly. I know the timing is terrible, but I need you to hear me. These past weeks, working with you, learning who you actually are beneath the fear, that's been the only good thing in this nightmare. And I don't want it to end just because Victor's gone. She looked up at him, tears starting to track down her face. You don't know who I actually am. You know the version I showed you because it was useful, but I'm not brave or strong or any of the things you think I am. I'm just someone who learned to survive by being invisible. Then be invisible with me. Adrian reached up, wiped away tears with his thumb. I don't need you to be brave all the time. I just need you to be honest. And right now, honestly, do you want to leave? Lena closed her eyes. No. Then stay. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. Stay. Not because we have to for appearances, or business, or any strategic reason. Stay because you want to. Because this thing between us, whatever it is, deserves a chance to become something real. What if I'm too damaged for real? Then we'll be damaged together. He leaned his forehead against hers. I'm not offering you perfection, Lena. I'm offering you partnership with someone who understands that survival leaves scars. Is that enough? She was quiet for a long moment, and Adrian felt his heart hammering against his ribs, waiting for her answer. Finally, she whispered, I'm scared. I know. If I stay and this doesn't work, I'll have nowhere to go. No family, no safety net, nothing. If you stay and this doesn't work, you'll still have resources, security, and my support in building whatever life you want. Adrian pulled back enough to see her face. I'm not your father. I won't trap you or hurt you or make you regret trusting me. You'll always have a choice. Promise me. Her hands gripped his shirt. Promise me that if I stay, if I try this, you won't become someone different once you feel secure. Promise me you won't turn into the kind of man who, I promise. Adrian said it like a vow. I will never hurt you the way your father did. Never. Lena searched his face for a long time, looking for lies or manipulation or the cruelty she'd learned to expect from powerful men. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. Okay, she breathed. I'll stay. But we do this slowly. We figure out what this is without pressure or expectations. And if either of us realizes it's not working, we'll handle it like adults. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. But I think it will work. Why? Because we've already survived the worst of each other. Everything else is just details. She laughed, a real laugh, not the nervous sound she usually made. That's possibly the most unromantic thing anyone's ever said. I'm not romantic. I'm practical. But Adrian was smiling too. Is that going to be a problem? No. Lena rose on her toes, kissed him carefully. I don't need romance. I just need honesty. The kiss was tentative, testing, nothing like the cold press of lips at their wedding. Adrian felt her trembling against him and gentled his touch, letting her set the pace. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were still wet, but she was smiling. This is crazy, she said. Completely. Adrian tucked hair behind her ear. But we've done crazier. We took down a murderer and exposed a massive conspiracy. Figuring out how to actually be married seems simple by comparison. Nothing about us is simple. True. But maybe that's okay. He pulled her back into his arms, and she let him, curling against his chest like she belonged there. We'll figure it out as we go. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the sun set outside the library windows. Somewhere in the city, Victor sat in a holding cell awaiting trial. Robert Hart was likely doing the same. The company would face scrutiny and investigation and scandal, but none of that mattered in this moment. In this moment, there was just Adrian and Lena, two damaged people choosing each other despite every reason not to. It wasn't the ending Adrian had expected when he'd married a shy stranger 3 months ago. But as he held his wife and felt her heartbeat steady against his chest, he thought maybe it was better than anything he could have planned. Sometimes the best victories were the ones you didn't see coming. The trial lasted 6 weeks and dominated every news cycle in the city. Adrian sat through most of it, watching prosecutors systematically dismantle Victor's defense with evidence he and James had compiled. The confession recording played in open court. Financial experts testified about the shell companies and stolen funds. Medical examiners explained how digoxin poisoning mimicked heart failure. Victor's lawyers tried everything, claimed the confession was coerced, argued the financial evidence was circumstantial, suggested Thomas Voss's death was natural, despite the toxicology reports. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree. Fraud. Conspiracy. Theft. The judge sentenced Victor to 40 years without possibility of parole. At 63, it was effectively a life sentence. Adrian felt nothing as they led his uncle away in handcuffs. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a hollow acknowledgement that justice, while served, couldn't undo the damage Victor had caused. Lena sat beside him through the entire verdict, her hand steady in his. She'd insisted on being there, despite Adrian's concerns about the media attention and her father's presence in the courtroom. Robert Hart sat 3 rows behind them, flanked by his own lawyers, facing charges as a co-conspirator. It's over, Lena whispered as the courtroom emptied. Not quite. Adrian nodded toward where Robert was arguing with his legal team. He still has his trial. I know, but the part where Victor could hurt you, that's over. She squeezed his hand. That's what matters to me. Robert's trial came 2 weeks later. With Victor already convicted and the evidence overwhelming, his lawyers negotiated a plea deal. 15 years in exchange for testimony against other co-conspirators and full restitution of the Hart family's involvement in the financial theft. Robert took the deal. He had no choice. The day he was sentenced, Lena stood outside the courthouse with Adrian, watching her father being led away. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes exploded around them. Lena didn't flinch. Do you feel anything? Adrian asked quietly. She considered the question seriously. Relief, mostly. That I'll never have to pretend he's a good father again. That other people finally see what he is. She turned away from the courthouse. Is that terrible? That I'm not sad? No, it's honest. Adrian guided her toward their car, where James waited to drive them home. You don't owe him grief after what he did to you. The press is going to say I'm cold, heartless. Lena slid into the back seat. They already started. I saw the headlines this morning. She had. The media had fixated on the shy heiress who'd helped expose her own father's crimes. Some painted her as brave. Others suggested she'd manipulated Adrian for personal gain. A few implied she'd been involved in the conspiracy from the start. Let them say whatever they want, Adrian said, settling beside her. We know the truth. That's all that matters. But he knew it bothered her. Lena had spent her whole life being invisible, And suddenly she was the center of attention she'd never wanted. Photographers camped outside the estate. Reporters called constantly. Social media dissected every photo of her, every public appearance, looking for signs of guilt or innocence or whatever narrative fit their preferred story. It was destroying her slowly, piece by piece. Adrian watched her retreat further into herself over the following weeks. She stopped leaving the estate entirely, stopped going to the library or the gardens or anywhere she might be photographed through the windows, started having panic attacks when the phone rang or someone knocked on the door. The girl who'd been brave enough to confront her abuser was disappearing back into the frightened shadow she'd been when they married. Adrian didn't know how to fix it. He tried being patient, giving her space, not pushing. But patience felt like abandonment, and space felt like neglect, and not pushing felt like letting her drown while he watched from shore. "I don't know what to do," he admitted to James one night in his office. It was 3 a.m. again. His old insomnia had returned, though now it came from worry rather than strategy. "She won't talk to me, won't eat properly, just sits in her room like she's waiting for something terrible to happen." "She's traumatized," James said. "Her entire world changed in 6 months. She went from being invisible to being famous, from being trapped to being free, from a fake marriage to—" He paused. "What is your marriage now exactly?" Adrian rubbed his face. "I don't know. We never really figured that out. Everything moved too fast, the trial, the media, dealing with the company. We haven't had time to just be together without some crisis demanding attention. Maybe that's the problem. She needs stability, and you're giving her patience when what she actually needs is certainty." James leaned back in his chair. "Have you told her you love her?" The question hit Adrian like a physical blow. "What?" "You love her. Anyone watching you two can see it, but have you actually said it?" Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. Had he? They'd had that conversation in the library after Victor's arrest, where he'd asked her to stay and she'd agreed. But he'd framed it as partnership, as practical arrangement. He'd been so careful not to pressure her, so focused on giving her choice, that he'd never actually told her how he felt. "I don't even know if that's what this is," he said finally. "I care about her. I want her safe and happy. I can't imagine my life without her in it." "But love?" He shook his head. "I don't know if I'm capable of that. My father made sure I understood that emotion was weakness." Your father was wrong about a lot of things," James stood. "And you're more capable of emotion than you think. You're just too scared to admit it." After James left, Adrian sat alone with that truth. He was scared, terrified, actually, of what it would mean to love someone, to be vulnerable, to admit that another person had become essential to his existence. His father had taught him that caring too much gave people power over you, that attachment was a liability. But his father had also been a miserable man who died alone in his mistress's bed, murdered by his own brother. Maybe his teachings weren't worth following. Adrian found Lena in her room, sitting by the window in the dark. She didn't look up when he entered. "I'm fine," she said before he could ask. "Just tired." "You're not fine, and I've been an idiot for pretending you are." Adrian sat on the floor beside her chair. "Talk to me, please." "About what?" "About whatever's making you hide in here like the walls are the only safe place left." He kept his voice gentle. "Is it the media? Your father's sentence? Something I did?" She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then softly, "I don't know who I'm supposed to be now." "What do you mean?" "For 26 years, I was Robert Hart's daughter. The quiet one, the disappointment, the girl who needed to be small and obedient or she'd get hurt." Elena's fingers twisted in her lap. "Then for a few months I was your ally, your partner in taking down Victor. I had a purpose, a role to play. But now?" She gestured helplessly. "Now I'm just Lena Voss, and I don't know what that means. I don't know how to be a person without a specific function." Adrian felt something crack in his chest. "You think you need to be useful to deserve to exist, don't I?" She finally looked at him. "You married me because Victor forced it. You kept me around because I was helpful during the investigation. Now that it's over, what's my purpose? What's keeping you from deciding you'd be better off without me? Is that what you think? That I only want you because you're useful? Isn't it true? Tears started sliding down her face. I don't bring anything to this marriage except problems. I'm broken and scared, and I can't even leave the house without having a panic attack. You deserve someone whole. Stop. Adrian moved to kneel in front of her, taking her face in his hands. Listen to me. I don't want someone whole. I don't want someone who doesn't understand what it's like to survive people who are supposed to protect you. I don't want someone who hasn't learned that strength sometimes looks like just getting out of bed in the morning. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. I want you, Lena. Not because you're useful, because you're you. You don't know me well enough to want that. Then let me know you better. Stop hiding. Stop deciding for me that you're not worth loving. The word slipped out before he could stop it, but once it was there, Adrian realized it was true. I love you. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And I'm done pretending this is just a convenient arrangement. Lena stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. You can't love me. We barely know each other. I know you're brave even when you're terrified. I know you notice everything and remember it all. I know you read financial law textbooks for fun and make perfect tea without asking how I like it. I know you cry over books about people who overcome abuse because you want to believe it's possible. Adrian pulled her hands into his. I know you make me want to be better than my father taught me to be. That's enough. That's more than enough. What if I can't be what you need? Then we'll figure it out together. But stop deciding alone that you're not good enough. Let me have a say in what I need. He pressed his forehead to hers. I need you to stay. Not because I'm forcing you or trapping you, because I'm asking. Because I want to build a real life with you, not just survive crises together. She was shaking now, her breath coming in short gasps. I'm so scared. I know, sweetheart. I know. Adrian pulled her into his arms, held her while she fell apart. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You have me. You have this. You have a home that's actually safe. What if I ruin it? You won't. And even if you did, we'd fix it. He stroked her hair, feeling her slowly calm against him. That's what people who love each other do. They mess up, and they fix it, and they keep trying. Lena pulled back enough to see his face. You really mean it. You love me. Yes. Even though I'm a mess? Especially because you're a mess. We match. Adrian managed to smile. I'm not exactly a prize myself. I work too much. I don't know how to relax. And I inherited my father's tendency to solve everything by throwing money at it. You're also stubborn and controlling, and you think you know what's best for everyone. But she was smiling through her tears. See? Perfect for each other. Adrian kissed her forehead. So stop trying to leave before I can disappoint you. Stay and let me prove I won't. Okay. She breathed it like a prayer. Okay, but Adrian, I need help, professional help. I can't just will myself to be better. Then we'll find you the best therapist money can buy. Whatever you need. He stood, pulling her up with him. But first you need to eat something. You've been living on tea and anxiety for 3 weeks. She laughed. A real laugh that sounded like the girl he'd fallen in love with during late-night strategy sessions. You're very romantic when you want to be. I contain multitudes. Adrian led her toward the door. Come on, let's raid the kitchen and pretend we're normal people for a while. We'll never be normal. True, but we can pretend. They spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, making sandwiches neither of them wanted and talking about everything except trials and murder and conspiracy. Just two people learning how to be together without crisis forcing their proximity. Felt revolutionary. The next morning, Adrian made calls. By afternoon, Lena had appointments with 3 different therapists who specialized in trauma recovery. By evening, James had arranged for additional security that would actually protect rather than surveil, people who would keep the media away without making Lena feel trapped. You're being very take charge about this, Lena observed, watching Adrian coordinate everything from his office. I'm good at logistics. Let me help the way I know how. Adrian finished an email, then turned to her. Besides, you've spent enough time taking care of yourself alone. Let someone else help carry the weight. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. We'll learn together. He held out his hand. Come on. James found a therapist who makes house calls. She's coming today to meet you. See if you're comfortable with her. The therapist's name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she was nothing like Lena expected. Older, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd heard every excuse and sob story imaginable. She sat in the library, Lena's favorite room, and asked direct questions that didn't leave room for evasion. "Your husband says you've been struggling since the trial ended." "My husband talks too much." But Lena was smiling slightly. "He's worried. That's usually a good sign." Dr. Chen settled into her chair. "Tell me what happens when you think about leaving the house." For the next hour, Lena talked about the panic attacks, the hypervigilance, the constant feeling that something terrible was about to happen, about how she'd thought surviving her father would make her free, but instead she just felt untethered, about how loving Adrian terrified her because everyone she'd ever loved had hurt her. Dr. Chen listened without judgment, took notes, asked clarifying questions. When the session ended, she gave Lena a simple assignment. Try to spend 10 minutes outside tomorrow. Just 10 minutes. See what happened. "That's it?" Lena asked. "Recovery isn't dramatic. It's small steps repeated until they become normal." Dr. Chen stood. "We're not trying to fix you, Lena. We're trying to help you remember that you were never broken, just hurt. There's a difference." After she left, Lena sat in the library for a long time, turning those words over in her mind. Not broken, just hurt. It felt like permission to stop punishing herself for not bouncing back immediately. Adrian found her there as the sun was setting. "How did it go?" "I think I like her." Lena looked up at him. "She didn't make me feel pathetic for being scared." "Good. Because you're not pathetic. You're recovering." Adrian sat beside her. "And I know I've been pushing you to be okay, and I'm sorry. I was treating this like a problem I could solve instead of something you needed to work through." "You were trying to help." "I was trying to fix you. That's different." He took her hand. "I'm going to try to do better at just being present instead of trying to manage everything." "That's going to be hard for you. You like managing things." "I know, but you're not a thing to manage. You're a person I love who's going through something difficult." Adrian squeezed her hand. "I can learn to sit with discomfort if it means you feel supported instead of pressured." Lena leaned against his shoulder. "We're both terrible at this. Spectacularly bad." Adrian wrapped an arm around her. "But we're trying. That counts for something." Over the following months, they learned how to actually be married. Lena started therapy twice a week. Slowly, carefully, she began venturing outside again, first just to the gardens, then to the gate, eventually into the city with Adrian beside her. The panic attacks didn't disappear, but they became manageable. She learned techniques to ground herself, ways to recognize when her brain was lying to her about danger. Adrian learned to step back, to let Lena struggle without immediately trying to solve her problems. It went against every instinct he had, but he got better at just listening, at being present without being controlling. They fought sometimes, real fights about real things, not the careful politeness of their early marriage. Lena accused Adrian of trying to manage her recovery like a business project. Adrian accused Lena of using her trauma as an excuse not to try. Both accusations had enough truth to sting, but they learned to apologize, to admit when they were wrong, to recognize that fighting didn't mean the relationship was over, just that they were actually being honest with each other. The company stabilized under Adrian's leadership. With Victor gone and the stolen funds recovered, Voss Holdings began growing again. Adrian restructured the board, hired new executives who actually understood accountability, and implemented oversight measures that would prevent another Victor from stealing everything. He also started delegating more, leaving the office at reasonable hours, actually taking weekends off. It felt wrong at first. His father had always said that executives who didn't work constantly were weak. But coming home to Lena, to dinner together, and quiet evenings in the library, felt more valuable than any business victory. Lena found her own purpose gradually. She started consulting for the company. Her ability to notice patterns and remember details made her invaluable for risk assessment and fraud detection. She worked remotely, which helped with her anxiety, and only on projects that interested her. She also started volunteering with an organization that helped domestic violence survivors. At first, just donations and behind-the-scenes work. Eventually, she began meeting with survivors, sharing her story, helping them understand that escape was possible. "You're doing it again," Adrian said one evening, finding her at her desk reviewing case files for the organization. "Doing what?" Being brave. He leaned against the doorframe. A year ago, you couldn't leave the house. Now, you're counseling other people who are where you were. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. Lena closed the file. And if I can help even one person get out faster than I did, that's worth the discomfort. Your father would hate this, you using your experience to help people like this. I know, Lena smiled. That's part of why I do it. 18 months after Victor's conviction, Adrian and Lena stood in an attorney's office, signing paperwork that would dissolve their original marriage contract. You understand this invalidates the prenuptial agreement and all associated business arrangements, the lawyer explained. The Hart family manufacturing contracts would need to be renegotiated as standard business deals, not marriage-based partnerships. We understand, Adrian said. That's the point. The lawyer looked confused. But sir, this essentially ends your marriage. You'd need to file for divorce or get married again, Lena finished. Actually married, not a business arrangement. Understanding dawned on the lawyer's face. Oh, that's unusually romantic, actually. We're unusual people. Adrian signed the final document, officially ending their strategic marriage. When can we file for a marriage license? Immediately, if you want. There's a 3-day waiting period, then you can have a ceremony. The lawyer was trying not to smile. Most people don't divorce and remarry the same person within a week. Most people don't have our history. Lena signed her name beside Adrian's. Can we do it here? The ceremony, I mean? Nothing public, no media, just us? You want me to officiate? Why not? You already know all our legal history. Adrian stood, helping Lena up. Unless you have ethical objections to marrying two people you just helped divorce. No objections. Just mild confusion about how my day turned into a romantic comedy. But the lawyer was pulling out a calendar. Friday work for you? I can do late afternoon after my other appointments. They agreed on Friday at 5. 3 days to wait, which felt both too long and not long enough. James thought they were insane. You're already married. What's the point of divorcing just to remarry immediately? The first marriage wasn't real, Adrian explained. It was Victor's manipulation. This one will be our choice. That's the most overthought romantic gesture I've ever heard. We're overthought people. Adrian didn't bother defending it further. Will you be there as witness? James's expression softened. Yeah, I'll be there. Dr. Chen thought it was therapeutic. You're reclaiming your narrative, taking something that was done to you and transforming it into something you chose. That's powerful. It feels silly sometimes, Lena admitted during their session, like we're making too big a deal out of something that's already legally binding. Legally binding isn't the same as emotionally meaningful. Dr. Chen leaned forward. You spent your whole life having choices taken away. This is you taking one back. That's not silly. That's healing. Friday arrived with unseasonably perfect weather. Lena wore a simple dress, nothing like the elaborate gown from their first wedding. Adrian wore a suit but no tie. They met in the lawyer's office at exactly 5 o'clock. James stood as witness, looking uncomfortable in formal clothes but trying to hide it. The lawyer had printed out generic vows and offered to read them, but Adrian shook his head. We'll do our own. He turned to Lena, took her hands, and didn't bother trying to hide the emotion in his voice. The first time we did this, I didn't know you. I thought I was getting a scared girl who'd never matter to me. Instead, I got the strongest person I've ever met, someone who taught me that surviving isn't the same as living, and that being vulnerable isn't weakness. He squeezed her hands. I can't promise I won't screw this up sometimes. I'm still learning how to be someone's partner instead of someone's obligation, but I promise to keep trying, to choose you every day, to build a life with you that's nothing like the one my father would have wanted. That's all I know how to offer. Lena's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. When we first met, I thought you were just another powerful man who'd eventually hurt me. I was ready to survive you until I could escape. Her voice shook but held steady. Instead, you gave me reasons to stay. You taught me that strength doesn't have to look like cruelty, that power can be used to protect instead of harm, that I could be scared and brave at the same time. She took a shaky breath. I can't promise I won't have bad days, or that my trauma won't sometimes make me difficult to love, but I promise to be honest, to tell you when I'm struggling instead of hiding it, To choose you back, even when it's scary. That's all I know how to offer. The lawyer cleared his throat, clearly affected. Right, well, by the power vested in me by the state, and given that you've both agreed to these vows, I declare you, again, married. You may kiss. This kiss was nothing like their wedding 6 years ago. Cold, performative, meaningless. This one was warm and real and full of everything they'd survived to get here. When they pulled apart, James was clapping slowly. Congratulations on your completely unnecessary but surprisingly touching second wedding. Shut up, Adrian said, but he was grinning. You're buying the celebratory drinks. They went to a bar that none of them had been to before, somewhere without memories or associations. Just 3 people sitting in a booth, celebrating something that looked crazy from the outside but made perfect sense to them. So what now? James asked, raising his glass. You've defeated the villain, saved the company, got the girl, and remarried her for emotional closure. What's the encore? Now we just live, Adrian looked at Lena. No more crises, no more drama, just figuring out how to be together without something trying to kill us. That sounds terrifying, Lena said. Absolutely. Adrian kissed her temple. We'll probably be terrible at it. Definitely. But she was laughing. But at least we'll be terrible together. They stayed at the bar until late, talking and laughing and being normal people celebrating a wedding. When they finally went home, the estate felt different. Not like a fortress anymore, but like a home. That night, in their room, the same room, now, not separate wings, Lena curled against Adrian's chest and asked the question she'd been holding. Do you ever regret it? That Victor forced this? That we didn't get to meet normally, fall in love the regular way? Adrian considered it. Sometimes. But then I remember that meeting normally probably means I would have been exactly like my father. Too closed off to let anyone in. Too damaged to believe love was possible. Victor's manipulation gave me you. That doesn't make what he did right, but I can't regret the result. I think about what my life would be like if this hadn't happened, Lena said quietly. If my father hadn't arranged the marriage, I'd probably still be in that house, still invisible, still waiting for him to finally kill me like he killed Sarah. She pressed closer. So no, I don't regret it. I regret the pain it came with, but not where we ended up. We turned something evil into something good. We survived. Lena looked up at him. And then we chose each other anyway. That's more powerful than any perfect love story. Adrian kissed her, slow and thorough, pouring every emotion he still didn't have words for into the contact. When they broke apart, Lena was smiling. I love you, she said. Simple, clear, true. I love you too. Adrian had said it before, but it felt different now. More real, like a promise rather than a confession. Even when you're being impossible. Especially when I'm being impossible. She settled back against his chest. That's when you know it's real. They fell asleep tangled together, 2 broken people who'd learned they fit better than anyone expected. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to their small victory. But inside the Voss estate, for the first time since Thomas Voss had died, there was something that felt like peace. 5 years later, Adrian stood in his office reviewing the latest quarterly reports when Lena appeared in the doorway holding a tablet. You need to see this, she said, her expression carefully neutral. Adrian looked up, immediately concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just look. She handed him the tablet. It was a news article. The headline read, Victor Voss dies in prison after medical complications. Adrian read the article twice, absorbing the details. Heart failure, brought on by the same condition that had killed his father. Victor had been 68. He'd served 5 years of his 40-year sentence. How do you feel? Lena asked carefully. I don't know. Adrian set down the tablet. I thought I'd feel something, satisfaction or closure or even grief. But it's just empty. That's okay. You don't have to feel any particular way about it. Lena moved closer. He was your uncle. He was also a murderer. Those things can both be true. My father would say I'm weak for not celebrating his death. Your father was wrong about most things. Lena took his hand. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about complicated people. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her close. What about you? Your father's still serving his sentence. Do you think about what you'll feel when he dies? Sometimes. Mostly, I think I'll feel relieved. That sounds terrible. It sounds honest. Adrian pressed a kiss to her hair. Which is all we promised each other. Honesty. They stood like that for a while, processing the news in their own ways. Eventually, Lena pulled back. I have something else to tell you. Something good. Yeah? The foundation approved our expansion plan. We're opening 3 new shelters in the next year, plus funding a legal clinic specifically for domestic violence survivors. Her eyes shone with excitement. We're going to be able to help so many more people. The foundation was something they'd started together 2 years ago, funded by the money recovered from Victor's theft. Using stolen money to help people escape the kind of abuse Lena had suffered felt like perfect justice. That's amazing. Adrian meant it. Watching Lena transform her trauma into purpose had been one of the best parts of their marriage. You've done incredible work with this. We've done incredible work, she corrected. This was your idea too. It was your vision. I just wrote the checks. Adrian smiled. But I'm proud of you. You took something terrible and made it matter. We both did. Lena kissed him softly. That's our thing now, apparently. Taking terrible things and making them into something worth having. I'll take it. Adrian checked his watch. We're supposed to have dinner with James in an hour. He's bringing his new girlfriend. The one he refuses to tell us anything about? That's the one. He says she'd intimidated by the whole power couple thing, and he wants to ease her in gently. Lena laughed. We're not a power couple. We're just 2 people who happen to have money and matching trust issues. That's exactly what a power couple is. Adrian pulled her toward the door. Come on, let's go meet the woman brave enough to date James. The restaurant was one they'd been to dozens of times. Upscale but not stuffy, with private booths that let them eat without photographers documenting every bite. James was already there, sitting with a woman in her 30s who looked nervous but determined. Adrian, Lena, this is Monica. James did the introductions with unusual formality. Monica, these are the friends I told you about. The ones who divorced and remarried each other a week later? Monica asked, then looked mortified. Sorry, James told me that story, and I thought it was romantic, but saying it out loud sounds like I'm making fun of you. We are that couple, Lena said, smiling. And it does sound insane when you say it out loud. We've made peace with that. They settled into easy conversation. Monica worked in victim advocacy, which explained why James thought she and Lena would get along and had opinions about everything from housing policy to the criminal justice system. She was sharp, funny, and didn't seem remotely intimidated by Adrian despite James's warnings. I like her, Lena said later, after James and Monica had left. She's good for him. He's been alone too long. Needed someone to remind him there's life outside security work and corporate espionage. Adrian helped Lena into their car. Think they'll last? I think if she can handle James's paranoia and trust issues, she can handle anything. Lena leaned against him as the driver pulled away from the restaurant. Kind of like how if you could handle my trauma and anxiety, you could handle anything. You make me sound heroic. I just loved you through it. That's the heroic part. Lena tilted her face up to kiss him. Staying when things got hard. Not running when I got messy. That's not nothing. You did the same for me. Stayed when you found out my family was made of murderers and thieves. Helped me rebuild myself into someone better than my father. Adrian stroked her hair. We saved each other. That's the truth of it. Best arranged marriage ever. Only because we arranged the second one ourselves. Adrian smiled against her hair. Smart of us. They drove home through the city that had witnessed their entire strange love story, from forced marriage to conspiracy to divorce to real commitment. The streets looked different now, less like a battlefield and more like just a city where 2 people had learned to choose each other. Back at the estate, they found their usual evening routine. Lena made tea while Adrian changed out of his suit. They met in the library, their favorite room. Where this had all really begun that night, she'd told him about her observations of Victor. Do you ever think about what we'd tell our younger selves? Lena asked, curling into her chair with her tea. From that first meeting? I'd tell myself to pay more attention to the quiet girl who wouldn't meet my eyes. that she was going to end up being the most important person in my life. Adrian settled across from her. What would you tell yourself? That the cold, scary man I was being forced to marry would eventually become my safe place. That surviving him would turn into choosing him. That I'd learn the difference between being controlled and being loved. She sipped her tea. I wouldn't have believed it. Neither would I. I was so convinced love was a liability, that caring made you weak. Adrian shook his head. My father did a lot of damage with that philosophy. But we unlearned it, together. Lena set down her cup. That's the story, really. Two people who were taught all the wrong lessons about love and power and survival, figuring out the truth despite everything. That's a better story than the one about revenge and murder. Both stories are true. Lena moved to sit beside him. The revenge and murder happened. But so did this. So did learning to be better than the people who hurt us. Adrian pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and tea and home. I'm glad Victor forced that marriage. I know I shouldn't be, but I am, because without it, I never would have found you. I'm glad too, even though it was terrible and traumatic and nearly destroyed us both. Lena pressed a kiss to his jaw. We took something meant to hurt us and turned it into something beautiful. That's power Victor never understood. The power of stubborn people who refuse to break. Exactly. Lena smiled against his skin. We're very good at that. They sat together in the library as the night deepened outside, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. Plans for the foundation. James's new relationship. Whether they should finally take that vacation they'd been discussing for 2 years. Normal conversations for normal people, except they'd never been normal and never would be. But they'd built something real anyway, something that existed because they chose it, not because anyone forced it. And in a life full of violence and betrayal and loss, that choice felt like the greatest victory of all. Years later, when people asked about their marriage, Adrian and Lena would tell different versions of the truth. Adrian would say he married a stranger and discovered his best friend. Lena would say she was forced into a cage and found the key to freedom was already inside. Both versions were true. Both versions were incomplete. The real story was simpler and more complicated than either version suggested. Two damaged people were thrown together by violence and chose to heal together instead of separately. They learned that love didn't fix trauma, but it made the healing less lonely. That strength could be gentle. That vulnerability could be brave. They learned that the shy girl who trembled at shadows had been strong all along, just in ways the world didn't recognize. That the cold air who thought emotions were weakness had been protecting something precious underneath. They learned each other, slowly and imperfectly, making mistakes and fixing them and making new ones. And somehow, impossibly, they built a life that neither of them could have imagined when they'd stood in that ridiculous mansion 6 years ago, promising things they didn't mean to a person they didn't know. They'd meant those promises now, every word, every day. That was enough. That was everything.